Okay, so you can see in one of my finished shaded spheres that there's a couple things going on. The first is the local color, and I chose yellow. So I used 3 different yellows to be able to go in and achieve the different shades I need. So I started with my lightest yellow, then later I started to overlap some of the mid-tone yellows in here, and then the deepest yellow where my core shadow goes. And that's all laid out in the instructions. Then I go back in with the complementary color. So we know yellow's complementary color is purple. So I got a light value of purple and a dark value of purple. And I went in, and that's where I started to, with my little overlapping ovals, start to put some of the purple directly onto my yellow. So the complementary color goes right on top of the local color. That's really important because that's how you're gonna start to get these darker shades. Because the yellow can't get dark on its own, right? Same thing with some of the other values. They just won't get as dark as they need. Now I'm being very light, I'm being very careful, and I'm just doing all these little circles softly, and they'll combine. And then eventually I go in, with my darker. And again, I'm just starting to apply in little areas, these little circles, and they're just gonna start to gently push my values down to make the darker color. And it blends with the yellow. So basically, the start to finish step of this, I'm gonna show you here. So I've gone in with my blue, I've left an area for the highlight that's white, and then I've gradually faded into a light blue and just a medium blue all over. And I did all of that with one pencil. I filled my whole circle with this one color. Now I'm gonna go to my next darkest blue, and I'm gonna start, not right here, but a little bit in, but I'm gonna go and I'm gonna start, again with my little circles, to sort of blend this over. And you'll see that as I do that, it starts to push the blue down a little bit darker. Now in some areas I can use a little bit more pressure, and then as I get close to where I want my blue to get really light, I'm just gonna like barely touch the paper and just sort of let it fade out so it just kind of combines with the blue I laid down earlier. And I'm gonna do that all over. So I come in a little bit, and I start with my little circles very, very lightly. Then as I get further and further away from my highlight, my blue gets a little bit darker because I'm just pressing a little bit harder. And again, I'm talking barely. It's so light, it's not much pressure. I can always make it too light, and if I don't like it, I can add more and make it darker later. But it's really, really hard, almost impossible to make it lighter. So I don't want to go too dark too fast. I can work my way darker. And you'll see as I go, as I push, and I just kind of go in and darken this area, now you'll see it starts to fade from light to dark. I'm gonna do that across the whole thing, and then I'll come back. Okay, so you can see now that I've put my medium blue kind of everywhere, except for I left a little bit up here in the highlight where it's white, and then you see only my lightest blue. But then I applied the medium blue everywhere else. I'm really wanting to get it nice and thick down here, a thick area of it, and then it tapers and gets thin as you go up along the sides. And now I can go in with my third and final value of blue, my darkest blue, and that's where I can start to go in. Again, same process. I'm gonna come in a little bit from the edge, and I'm just gonna start adding a little bit of this darker blue. Very lightly with thin light circles. I'm gonna wrap it up close to the edge. And then as I get further and further away, I'm pressing a little bit harder and a little bit harder. So again, that's gonna make my shadow get to that core shadow. And I can really do that all the way to the edge. Just wanna be careful along the edge. Because again, I'm doing these little circles. And really anywhere I start doing lines, it's gonna get streaky and I'm gonna have issues. But as I go up, and I'm even bringing it up into this area up near the top just a little bit. But I start really lightly overlapping the medium blue value. And then as I get further and further away from that highlight, it gets darker and darker. And again, little circles, nice and even. Don't rush it. You'll see how this works. But as I do this, then it starts to push my values down. make it darker. I'm starting to get that core shadow. So I'll pick it back up and show you the next step. So now that my darker value is applied everywhere and it fades dark to medium to light, now I can't really make this any darker unless I press really hard. And I don't want to press crazy hard because that gets like a weird waxy finish. Instead, I'm going to take blue's complementary color, which is orange, and I've got a light version and a dark version of orange, and I'm going to start combining first with the light. So where my darkest shadows are, I'm going to start to, again, softly with little circles, blend some of this orange into these areas where I want my shadows to be really dark. And I'm going to leave a little gap near the edge of my circle because I actually want it to look like a little bit of light is being reflected in. Now you might see this and think, I don't want this to have this weird yellowy orange thing. You just got to trust me in the process. I'm doing this. And again, it's subtle. I don't want this, I'm not doing this really hard. I'm trying to do this kind of subtly. And I want it to follow the arc. Now, it doesn't go all the way to overlap all this. I shouldn't see orange in here. It's really just in the area right in the center where my core shadow is, where it should be darkest. I can do a little bit up in here. And I'm doing this really, really fast. You're going to go slow, more carefully, more evenly, and do that all the way to the edges. After that, that was my lighter orange. Then I'm going to take my darker orange and I'm going to overlap that a little bit. And I'm even going to go a little bit harder kind of in some of these really dark areas where I want my core shadow to be darkest, which up here, there's not much. So it's really down low. And where I combine it. And it's going to start to sort of mix. You're going to notice the pencil almost feels smooth because it's mixing a little bit. Nice and dark. And again, up here, I'm not pressing very hard, just a little bit. Now, if it's too orange and you don't like it, okay, but we did it everywhere. So then I go back with my lightest blue and I can do some little circles over it. And that'll kind of mix with the orange and cool it down a little bit and really turn this into a deep blue. But you can kind of see the difference of where I've done that. And again, I'm not pressing hard. I'm just mixing lots of little circles. And you can see where I've done it versus where I haven't. But that's going to go in, and the blue and the orange are going to mix. We know that blue and orange, when they mix, are complementary colors. So that's going to create a neutral. It's going to create almost like a brown. And then I've got this really nice shadow and this shading, which is way more interesting than if I just did dark blue. It's going to feel unified across the whole piece. I can go ahead as I do this little bit of circle work, these little ovals. I know there's a lot of layers and it can get frustrating and tiresome, and you might think, why, I don't want to do all this, but it's going to create a really rich, interesting color profile that's going to make your art a lot more engaging and technically excellent. And I can put some decent pressure in here for my core shadow, but now, yeah, look how rich and deep those blues got because they're mixing with the orange. I've done it, and I'm really, really proud of that. And so now I've got my two spheres that I did the same way. The only difference was instead of orange and blue, I used yellow and violet. And so then I've got my blue. You barely even see the orange in it, and you're good to go. And that is how you shade a sphere using a local color with its complementary color.